Good morning, everyone. And our panelists, Lola and Lauren. Can I get a round of applause, please?
Thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for being with us on this Friday morning, where I know many didn't make it out of their beds, and others are seeing the great Spike Lee. There's so many great things going on at Cannes, so we're really blessed and happy that you're here with us. First, let's do some introductions, and then we'll dive into the topic, creator activism, how to build your personal brand with your purpose. So Lauren, I'm going to shoot it over to you first. How would you introduce yourself to everyone?
Good morning, good morning. I am Lauren Maillian, President of Digital Innovation at Hero Media. I would introduce myself as President, Digital Innovation, Hero Media, three-time entrepreneur, board director, investor, builder, mom, wife, all the things.
Love it. And over to my end, my name's Lola Bakare. Many of you might have seen me on LinkedIn. I tend to run my mouth there a lot. But outside of opining in that space, I'm a CMO advisor and inclusive marketing strategist who grew up with experience on the brand side of marketing, started my career at Gatorade, did some time at Diageo and Smirnoff brand, worked at Dell, various things, got my MBA at NYU Stern, and in the last number of years have been really passionate about serving marketers to help them become their highest professional selves. And part of that is through the lens of responsible marketing, which is a thought leadership platform and soon-to-be book that I've come up with to help us take advantage of the opportunity to make a social impact with marketing that is not performative and also has commercial impact. So that's kind of my thing, what I'm passionate about. What we wanted to do today is really give a roadmap, a toolkit, a blueprint to how everyone out there can use what you're passionate about to bolster your personal brand with your personal purpose. Not your company's mission, but your personal purpose. And so, Lauren, you're the perfect person because I've been admiring the way that you do this online and elsewhere for years now. So I wanted to start by kind of referring to one of the things that you said when we first started talking about this. And you said that building your personal brand means bringing your truth and lived experience to the table. Can you tell us more about that and how did you get started doing it?
I will start and answer that. I will also say I love that in every interaction that I have with you, you forget nothing. And so you got that verbatim. But, I think...
Always be prepared. I was a Girl Scout.
I love it. I love it. And Lola's always prepared and always has a strong point of view on how we stand up as people and brands. So I thank you for asking me to be in this conversation with you because you are the queen of responsible marketing. That is you, girl. And
receiving it.
Take it. Take all your flowers. The part of our life, I think what we really love and enjoy about each other is that we embrace our differences, yes. Who we are, what makes us different, what makes us unique, and that's a positive. But where does our uniqueness come from? It comes from our lived experiences, it comes from our truths, and that's what allows us to be full people. And I think for a long time, someone would say, well, what is it to be your best self or your full self? It's like, don't be like everybody else. Don't try to conform. Find your lane and find your comfort in your voice, in your difference, whether that is appearance, accent, tone of voice, cadence, what you've gone through, where you've lived, what you do and don't like, and find your respectful way to honor who you are and what your preferences are. I think the world has said conform. We've spent a lot of time trying to conform. What the heck are we conforming to? Whose blueprint? Of what region, what state, what, archetype? I don't see where we were heading until we all began to feel like we could be ourselves. Yeah. I think we are at Inkwell Beach, right? So we're here for the culture. I think as people of color, we have just begun to feel even more comfortable. I'm not saying that we're still not afraid and often uncomfortable, but I think we are just beginning to feel more comfortable being able to speak our truth in places that aren't just a reflection of who we are. So I think it's always easier to speak about what makes us different when we're among people who we feel share some similar differences, right? But what about when we are in spaces, we're in Cannes. This is the most diverse Cannes Lions ever. Mm-hmm. Is it as easy and as comfortable to be our full and best selves when we know that we are in a place that's never seen this much diversity before? No.
Right.
But guess what? We're gonna do it anyway.
We're doing it anyway. And that is where the success comes from. So I want to get a little bit more tactical because Lauren, if you follow Lauren on LinkedIn, she has a newsletter. She's at Hero Collective now, was at Digital Undivided before, but her personal brand initiatives have been consistent throughout. So when did you first start expressing yourself online? And what did that look like?
That's a good question. When did I first start expressing myself online and what did that look like?
Well, and I'll pause for a second. I'm going to ask the audience a question. Of everyone sitting out there, how many of you would say you express yourself online in some way? Okay, nearly 100%. Good, we'll come back to that.
I started expressing myself online with Facebook when I had my very first company. And it was a requirement in order to have a company page, right? I had to be an administrator, so that was why I had a personal page to begin with. It started out as a private page, friends only. I had a protected Instagram, being like a private Instagram, and I recall exactly when this happened, until 2014. And I remember the time because it's when my book was coming out. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to, maybe it was the very end of 2013. My book came out, The Path Redefined, May of 2014. It was obviously very clear that you can't sell books with a protected social media account. So I went from a private account where it was just pictures of my children, who are here today, to, okay, I'm gonna open up my page and I have to think about how I wanna open up my life. I have to think about how I wanna share, what I wanna share, how frequently I wanna share, how open, how real, how honest I want it to be. And I also had to think about what my tracks were gonna be. Was I going to share my children and our day-to-day routine with everybody? Did that add value to everybody's life? Was I just gonna talk about work? Did that add value to everybody's life? Was I just gonna talk about my book? Well, you find out that you need a personal brand, especially when you're an author, because if you just talk about the book, maybe the topic is interesting, but that topic is written on a lot. Right. What do people want to buy a book for? Why are we going to want to buy your book? Because we want to know where your opinions have led you, right? So I had to figure out how I was going to show up in my full self online with my personal brand on social media. And I had to think about, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to share my kids because that's my truth. And at the time I was a single mom and had gone through, was going through a bad divorce, an awful time. And it was also what, people wanted to understand about me as the author if they were going to read a book entitled The Path Redefined.
Yep.
Because if I wasn't credible in needing to redefine my own path, why the heck did you want to read my book?
Yep.
And my subtitle, Getting to the Top on Your Own Terms. Why am I motivated to do so? You needed to understand who I was in order to understand my motivations and the crux of my book, and to even have an inkling into what experiences I might share and why you would find them valuable. And it was interesting because I never really thought I was going to end up in the women's space. I knew, obviously, I'm a woman, I'm a black woman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a lot of things. But when I started sharing my personal brand and my truth, that's when my personal brand honestly developed for me.
Yes.
Because it was what people were saying to me after talks and coming up and saying, wow, I came for the topic, but when I heard about who you are, or what you've gone through, or what you are going through in this moment, I'm navigating something similar. I want to read your book so that I can understand how the heck I can read. Now I understand why you need to redefine your path.
Yep.
That's where it started.
And I have had such a parallel journey in many ways, Lauren. the one thing that you said that I want everyone to take away is that it reveals itself when you start sharing your reality, right? Your real past, what you've actually been through, not just the good, but also the bad and the ugly and the challenging. We always say, you want to speak from a scar, not an active wound. So as long as you can sort of differentiate from the places where you're currently deep in trauma, I don't recommend sharing about those necessarily on social, but if you can speak from your scabs and be vulnerable enough to say what needed to be redefined, where you didn't think you were your highest professional self, in my case, if you can start from that story of reality, then people get invested in you. And then by interacting with how they're responding to you, you start to understand what you need to be sharing more about. So that's something I hope everybody takes away. If you're not a little bit scared after you post something, it probably wasn't vulnerable enough. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree. I think my highest engagement posts are the ones that I'm probably like vacillating on, going, oh man, hanging up on this word, what do I hashtag it? How provocative do I want to be? Do I want to bury the lead a little bit? Do I want to jump right into it? I'll also say, though, to your point about speaking, I have not heard this, but I love this analogy of speaking from your scabs and not your wounds, which is essentially not speaking of your active trauma, but like Lola said, speaking about it after you've had a little time to process it. Mm-hmm. But what I'll also say about your personal brand working for you is that my book is 10 years old, nearly, and it's a perennial book in many ways, and it's now selling even better than it was selling before because people who are following me and watching me on social media and with my career, they have literally seen my life evolve to the point where I've mentioned I have my children here at Cannes Lions this year. I have a 15-year-old son, Jaden. I have a 13-year-old daughter, Chloe, and they say, Mommy, people recognize me. I'm like, yes. And people go up to them and say, I've watched you grow up. And it's, they're learning what that is, but it's also that my personal brand has evolved in front of my community, my real life community, my online community. Mm-hmm. Folks have watched me get remarried. Folks have watched me, change the trajectory of my life and my career just when I thought I had already redefined my path enough to write a book in 2014. People are like, well, my gosh, you've really redefined your path again. And
that's what life is, right?
Exactly. It's a constant evolution. But I think, again, it is already reinforcing the fact of that thought leadership in my personal brand. I'm still that same person. You've watched me continue to grind. And I'm not the only one. There are a lot of folks that are here in the audience, here at Cannes Lions, that I've watched redefine their path on their own terms. They've absolutely, lived out the truth of the subtitle of The Path Redefined and gotten to the top on their own terms as well. And so, when we're able to see that actually manifest in real time, that is what also creates that trust. Yes. That transparency creates the trust. The trust creates the opportunities. It is what really can catapult so much of your life. But it has to be true to who you are. If it doesn't feel comfortable, you're not going to show up in your full self, and it's going to be seen, it's going to be felt, it's going to be evident.
Yeah. I mean, another thing I'd add along those lines is that you don't have to be there to get there. So I think we see a lot of people who've already achieved the highest point in their career. You might call them, I fondly do, biz-celebrities. We all know who they are. And they're posting about living in that space. But there's another approach where you can almost foresee, here's where I want to be. Well, who do I need to be paying attention to me in order to get there? Well, what do those people need and how can I serve them? How can I delight them? How can I entertain them? And that was the intentionality with which I started posting solely with a focus on engaging corporate marketers and CMOs maybe 2-3 years ago now. I didn't have a wide awareness and credibility with all of the ones I hadn't worked with prior in my marketing career, but I decided to build that by being in front of them and sort of owning it and saying, I'm Lola and I'm going to advise you. Now, 3 years later, similarly at this conference, I've been shocked how many people, Fortune 500 CMOs, have come up to me and said, like, oh yeah, I never miss a post of yours. people have never engaged with a single one. Oh yeah, the other day when you said that. Oh yeah, I read your stuff. So you start to realize that you can become influential simply by building your influence by sharing. And another thing I'd recommend is definitely connect with everyone that you would like to be in your audience. When I first started posting on LinkedIn more in earnest, and we're both top voices on LinkedIn, not to brag, but it is what it is, I connected with everyone with a CMO title. I would say 95% plus of them said yes. No note, no introduction, just my title CMO advisor, I'm connecting with you. So think about ways that you can build your audience in a very intentional manner. And then back to you, Lauren, I want to talk a little bit about process. I know yours is probably way more methodical than mine. What is your content creation process?
Okay, I'm gonna keep this 100% real. My content creation process is all over the place. I am begging my 13-year-old daughter to be my head of trend and social to help me.
Love that.
Because I cannot keep up. I've got 90,000 pictures in my camera roll and 14,000 videos. It goes way far back. I like all my memories in one place. That's that. So content is not the problem. I think the problem is working behind the scenes in the real world and keeping up with the content. I try to make sure, and what's most important, especially, and I do all of my posting myself, so a lot of folks will say, well, why don't you have somebody put it up for you? But my personal brand is that personal to me, to be honest, that I'm so afraid. My nightmare would be that I have someone who's awesome working with me, who makes a joke that they think is funny that I don't think is funny, or that makes a statement or puts a hashtag or just does anything that I wouldn't really truly do. And so a lot of people think it's wild that nobody has access to my social other than me, but that's just how I like it. It also means, though, if you've been following me, you know that when I go quiet, it's because I'm doing a lot behind the scenes, and you're about to hear about a lot of really amazing stuff.
And by the way,
I've been
that's
busy.
strategic too. That taking a pause, keep people wanting more. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think, yes, it is strategic, although it's just natural in that way. But I think the strategic part is that when I know I've been quiet for a while, I come back and say, hey, y'all, it's like, buckle up. There's going to be a lot of updates, because if I've been quiet, it's because I haven't been able to catch my own breath, and there's a lot to share. And so, full disclosure, that applies to Cannes Lions 2023 as well, because I've got at least 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 posts coming, including
Same.
from this talk, that this year was so intense. There was no way that I could keep up with content, images, videos, this, that, and the other, pictures, and go do 4 talks, including this talk, and do my real work, and have meetings, and also share the experience, and also be in the moment, and also be a mom and a wife on the ground. It just, no way. And I gotta eat, and I still wasn't even eating. I've eaten once a day. So if I can't fit in 3 meals a day, I can't fit in 1 post. That's just that. And I haven't worked out in 3 weeks, and everybody knows that, because at least on my stories, I'm pretty good about my morning, get up, sweat, get going. And if you follow me, you haven't seen that in 3 weeks. So, I'm behind on that too.
Social as a method of accountability is a whole nother thing. It's interesting. So one decision I made that's different, and I respect that you're able to be active on multiple platforms. I decided at the beginning of, call it like fall 2022, so last year, that I was going all in on LinkedIn, and I'll be on the other places. Maybe I'll tweet about a show I'm watching or something funny, but my content creation happens on LinkedIn. I'm completely dark on Instagram. It's actually very sad. But I made that decision because it's the platform that feels most natural to me to share. And there's the least amount, for whatever reason, of friction between idea and creation for me there. And that was revolutionary for me. It's where I saw a lot of growth start to take off, because that was just the place that I came to. Like you said, I also post all my own stuff. And by the way, I've asked a lot of executives who are super popular on LinkedIn this question, and the ones whose content we all admire the most are doing it themselves. Todd Kaplan's a good example of someone with a pretty big job, CMO at PepsiCo, and he has told me that every single post is him. And he wants it to be that way for all the reasons Lauren said. But so process-wise, and this is a recommendation for anyone who's kind of maybe stuck trying to get started, I tell people to think about that hot take that you want to send to your group text that's related to sort of what you do professionally, or maybe just anything else, and share that hot take on LinkedIn or on Twitter, on Instagram, or whatever. And get in the habit of making it about what you think, what you feel, what you want to advocate for. What change do you want to create? What fired you up? And that can easily become, a very simple to execute text-based content strategy before you get into photo shoots and all the other things.
Yeah, and I'll also add on that for a while I felt as though Instagram could be my place for, certain pictures and certain imagery and messaging that was really more maybe lifestyle and travel and my whereabouts and this and that, and like sprinkle in my kids felt appropriate. Facebook for a while felt appropriate to just be like the place for friends and family. And then LinkedIn felt like I really had to show up as my full-on, buttoned-up, professional multi-hyphenate self. And I will say, and Lola mentioned we're both top voices, and it's been incredible what LinkedIn has done for me. It's not the place that I have the largest following, but it is the place where I have the most kind of senior following, if you will. And a lot of those people then end up following me on Instagram or what have you, but they're also maybe not, checking Instagram as often, depending on what their role is or how senior they are, even if they're following me there. But to Lola's point, they're on LinkedIn every day, at every level, right? So maybe they're on Instagram a couple times a week, maybe once a day, but if so, then they're on LinkedIn. If they're a C-level executive, probably 3 times whatever it is that they're on the other socials.
Well, and not to cut you off there, but to add a little other sprinkle into that, when are they in the mindset of engaging with you professionally? That's LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say is that since becoming a top voice with LinkedIn, I felt even more comfortable showing up in my full self. That's also because I think the entire LinkedIn team does a really good job of saying, hey, be who you are. Often some prompts and things for the top voices where I've even said to myself, like, wow, LinkedIn, you want to know my opinion on this? Interesting. Mm-hmm. I did a LinkedIn recording and session that'll be coming out from Cannes Lions, and it was all about, hey, what are you posting here? And I have been, and I said this in the clip that will come out, or I don't know if they'll keep it or not, but let's see, that I actually share things that I think are personal now on LinkedIn, and I didn't do that a couple of years ago. I had never put up a picture of my children on LinkedIn. I think the very first time I ever showed like faces of my family, my kids, my husband, what have you, on LinkedIn was like our holiday card, because that felt appropriate. It was like, here is our holiday card. I remember that one. And it was just the digital version of our holiday card, so it still felt appropriate. And it was like, from us to you. But now I'll put up a picture of us doing what we do, like just being a family, if it's appropriate and kind of relevant to a talk track or a theme that I've been speaking about. So if I have my kids at a work event or conference and they're on the road with me, you're going to see that because it's appropriate for you to know that I have brought my full self to Cannes Lions this year, by way of example. Mm-hmm. And I have seen that there is so much appreciation for that. And I see that we are also observing other very senior executives doing similar things where they are sharing their personal stories. We saw it around, as an example, abortion. We saw it around political issues. We saw it around a lot of things where I think folks, it sparked important conversation, first. Second, it opened doors and dialogue for a lot of people. And even the most senior execs, and I'm sure Lola, you probably feel the same, will say, you know what? This issue was so important to me that I could not kind of live in this box of somebody saying, this is what's appropriate for, work conversation or LinkedIn. This is a world issue. This is a social issue. This is something that I need to use my voice for. And so, creator activism, you gotta be who you are. Yep. You gotta show up saying what you like, what you don't like. Lola, you don't know this, but I think I'm gonna say it.
Do it.
That, and this happened yesterday. I'm not gonna get into details, but I will just say that this is the most diverse Cannes Lions ever. We can agree on that, yes?
Yes.
Yes, we can agree on that? Okay. I think we can also agree that we know that the world is still not welcoming to us. We can agree on that, yes?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I'll just leave it at, I experienced that yesterday here at a restaurant, which I won't name now. And it was a reminder. And I will say that I have called up to LinkedIn and meeting with them today because when I was doing that recording that I mentioned to you, I talked about being my full self. And one of the questions in the prompts was, what are you posting at Cannes? What are you posting at hashtag Cannes 2023 on LinkedIn? And I said inclusive content, diverse content, the importance of creating space in this industry, the importance of moving advertising dollars to diverse-owned media like Hero Media. These are all the things that I talked about in that clip because it's true. Those are all the things that I've been talking about in my talks up and down the Croisette. And when I reached out to LinkedIn last night, I got an immediate response. They said, yeah, let's sit down and talk. And I said, I want to talk about how we are going to share the Black experience on LinkedIn because I've had an amazing time. This is my second Cannes Lions. But last night, not so good. And I have to be truthful about that.
Yep.
But I'm still thinking, and I'm going to have to talk to you about how I'm going to share that with all of my community so that when we come back to Cannes Lions next year, none of us go to that restaurant, A, and B, we have an incredible time, and C, you see that you might look at me and say, ooh, Lauren Maillian, you've redefined your path, you've done all of these things, you have all of these followers, you are whatever the world might think I am. That clearly does not guard me from racism or disrespect, and I'm not going to come to Cannes and say it didn't happen to me, and that is a part of my personal brand. I have not yet, going to the strategic part, decided how I want to share that experience. Trust and believe I'm going to lean on people like Lola and the brightest minds I know to determine the best way to respond. But it will be part of my story.
I'm going to give you my advice real time, Lauren. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a sad reminder of how ubiquitous that experience is. I kid you not when I say that my recap post for my first ever Cannes experience last year included a story about being slighted due to racial profiling at a restaurant. It probably wasn't the same restaurant.
If it was, then we got a real story to tell.
If it was, but we know these things happen to us all the time. And what did I do? The post was, here was the joy, and listed all the things that were joyous about it, and here was the pain, and listed all the things that were painful about the experience. And I think we can holistically tell stories that include both sides of our coins. I don't think Lauren always has to be the upbeat encourager of women. I think Lauren can show up also as the person who was harmed and share that in the same conversation, in the same post, and it will have a powerful effect on the sort of worthiness that others have of sharing their stories. The most rewarding moments to me are when people DM me, not executives, anybody, and say, wow, because you said that, I feel like I can say that.
I'm going to thank you. You just gave me my strategy.
My
recap post will be my joy, and the one piece of pain will be at the bottom.
There you go. So we did want to open up for a few questions, but I also do want to get a little bit more tactical for sort of the last, write it down, here's what you can go back and do question. So Lauren, now this is me asking you for strategic advice, and hopefully it'll help someone in the audience. So let's say someone is leaving here saying, I want to start creating a personal brand. I want to use my voice to share more than just my company news. What are the first 3 things you would recommend that person do?
First 3 things. Be clear on what you want to share. I often say, we can be good at a lot of things, but are those the things that you want people to ask you about? And my greatest example is, I think I'm a really good cook. I don't think I'm the best cook, but I think I'm a really good cook. But I don't share my cooking because A, I don't think it's relevant, and B, I don't really want y'all asking me for recipes and all these other things. So, and I don't really have recipes because I cook by smell and taste, and so it would all probably just not work well. So there's the strategy. If it doesn't work well, then don't do it. So that's one. I would say think about what you want to share, but make sure that what you are sharing are the things that you are either good at, passionate about, or kind of dedicating yourself to acquiring your skill in, right? Even if it's something new, that's okay. But I would say don't share things that you really don't want folks kind of knowing you for or coming and asking you about. So there's that. And example, I have a lot of girlfriends that are really good at hair, and like they don't post about their hair for the same reason, because I've given them this advice. They're like, I don't want people asking me hair questions. I want them asking me, professional questions.
I love that lens of like, what do you want people to ask you about? That's great.
So there's that. I love that we're learning from each other. There's that. I would say the second thing is be consistent. That doesn't always mean frequent, but it means consistent. So I'm consistent in that I've already told you, sometimes I'm posting all the time, sometimes I'm taking a break. But the consistent part is when I take a break, you know why. So there is some anticipation there. There is some consistency there, even still. The third thing I would say is respond to the comments as much as you can. And this is a place where I say I struggle. I do respond to all of the comments. I don't respond to them right now as quickly all the time as I would like to. I feel like I'm doing a really good job of responding to same-day comments. But then I feel like if folks are commenting 2 or 3 days later, it's a little difficult for me to go back to all of those posts and make sure. But I do it. I've actually made a time now, like a weekly time. It's not a set time, but it's just like a Saturday or Sunday morning thing that I will grab my tea and sit outside and say, like, let me just make sure that I have responded to all of the comments on post. So engage with the folks who are engaging with you, because that's also where you can learn a lot.
Yep, absolutely. And if I had to add one thing to that list, such a perfect list, I would say, and this might take some more time, but it's a really good exercise, especially if you think you might be moving careers or moving roles or trying to get into something entrepreneurial at one point. Develop your own branded ideas. So it's one thing to brand yourself as a person, but what is the idea that you want to be associated with you, and how can you teach people things around that using, whether it's 1, 2, 3 lists, this, not that frameworks, or whatever it is. Think about like the classic Bain, BCG consulting kind of framework models. How can you build some intellectual property that's based on your branded idea? For me, it's #responsible marketing. Lauren, I feel like you have a custom hashtag too, do you?
The Path Redefined.
There you go, and it's her book.
It is.
And there's frameworks in the book. So you start to see how all these things synergize. I came up with responsible marketing as a part of the book deal, but I'm sure there are people who, whatever their idea is, could become their book deal, right? So think about that place you can own. And with that, I think we're at time, but maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions. 1 question from the audience, if someone has one. Yes.
When you said the babies were here, I was like, where are they? They're right here. They're not babies. Yes, exactly. Sisters, love you both. Absolutely love you both. I think the question I would have to sort of piggyback on building a personal brand, the question I have is, engagement is important. Talk about how you create conversation by asking open-ended questions as opposed to just making statements. So we're talking about making a personal brand statement, but the engagement really comes from the responses, right? So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm going to go back to something that Lola said, that so many CMOs come up to her, but they don't engage with the post, but clearly they're watching them. I do find that sometimes when we're asking questions and asking questions in our post, it's not that the responses are always coming on the post themselves. Sometimes the responses are coming in DMs, especially if the questions are uncomfortable or difficult or new, or folks don't feel like it'll be, well received. So, and often I say, like, you drop your comment, and I mean it, but I do also open my DMs exactly for that reason. Lola, do you want to? I feel like there's some good insight there.
I have so many thoughts on this, and it's a few things. A lot of the tips and tricks that a lot of LinkedIn quote unquote gurus will tell you have to follow to get engagement are hogwash. And one of those is always ask a question at the end of the post. Not the case to create engagement necessarily. And here's what I've learned from my experience. The more surefire way to get people to respond is to be pure in your provocation. Like, some people know me for my posts about Chief. We won't get into that right now. But it's like, literally, this is what I find, fill in the blank. Reprehensible is a word that comes to mind about this thing. And here's why. And it's like, period at the end. Those are the posts where I have hundreds and hundreds of comments. It's like, you share your thing, boom, and then people are inspired to jump in and either say, yeah, or like, no. But they're inspired by the fact that you shared your opinion purely. I think also I would say, get away from any sugarcoating of like trying to sound nice, because that also, I think, takes away from the visceral reaction of someone responding. It's true, honestly, if I could give any advice on how to succeed on LinkedIn especially, it's stop trying to sound nice. Instead, sound like you and share what you think. Maybe not for everyone, but it's a strategy that works for me. And I'm pretty nice. I just don't have to sound nice.
And I'll say, Lola, you're really nice. But I'll also say that because you have coined yourself as the responsible marketer, the voice of responsible marketing, you have created trust through your platform that if you are not happy and excited and fun and using emojis and exclamation marks, then we know what time it is. We know we need to really read. We know we need to really pay attention. I know when I have to hit see more that I need to fully read your post because it was important. You put up a post recently, and I know we're at time, but I want to say this is important. You put up a post recently about, and it was a selfie of you smiling, and it was about being called too much. Mm-hmm. And I flipping loved it. And so did everybody else. And you fully embraced everything. You said, and I think you started with a question, or maybe it was in the first two sentences.
Have you ever been called too much?
Yeah, it started with that, right? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been called too much? Well, of course, that made me read. I love Lola, but separate from that, I was like, have you ever been called too much? Probably, I'm sure.
You never.
I want to read what she's talking about right now. And you kept it real. You said, my voice, my skin color, my height, my everything, my shape, my dress, my culture. Have you ever been called too much? And not only did that post keep coming up in my feed because it was so popular, and this was, I don't know, you put it up 2 weeks ago and I haven't gone back to it since, but I remember that I was intrigued by the amount of non-minority women who engaged with that post. And then I just had to go see their profiles because I was just curious as like who they were and what made them feel like they were too much to resonate with her post. So I was like, well, I mean, you don't know that I did this, but I'm telling you. And I was like, is it their title? Is it because they feel that they're too tall, too big, too this, too that, too small, too short, too whatever? But clearly, there's a whole lot of very senior, accomplished, professional people on LinkedIn who have been called or made to feel that they were too much. And
Absolutely.
Clearly, she striked a chord. So I'll leave you with that. Be who you are. Show up as your full self. Watch out for my LinkedIn post and my social post on my joy and my pain. It'll come after all my fun stuff. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I'll talk to Lola about the strategy on that because the rest of the time has been incredible. So I think I want to finish sharing all of the joy, then in with the pain, and then just go back to all the work that's not on the crozet.
Whatever feels most comfortable to you is going to be the strategy, but we'll talk about it. Everyone, our DMs are open, like we said. Would love to stay in touch. Thank you so much for your attention and enjoy what is the rest of the last day of the festival.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lola.